Hello and welcome to Talk the Thrones, the Ringers Game of Thrones after show. My name is Chris Ryan. This is Jason Concepcion. That is Mallory Rubin. We are non-flammable after show hosts, and we are here to talk about the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones that we will ever see.
Yep.
There have been episodes of Game of Thrones that we have liked. There have been episodes we've loved, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
There have been episodes we haven't liked so much. I don't know if you could really classify this as when you like or don't like, because I think it was kind of unlike any episode we've ever seen in a lot of ways.
It's definitely one that took a decade or two off my life.
Yeah.
Shaking still, struggling to process
Yeah,
that.
it was definitely.
I don't know. I was so numb to it, to be honest with you. It just was like, this is going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. It was obviously going to happen.
Yeah.
They had set it up. It was just like, just show it to me.
And
just show me the thing.
Which part is the it? Dany's
sacking of King's
Dany
Landing.
becoming Queen of the Ashes,
Dany
millions
becoming-
of people being
We're
murdered.
going to talk
Right.
about all these. These are wildfire moments that we'll be talking about. We're obviously on Twitter. It's hashtag Talk the Thrones if you want to reach out to us. We're going to talk about wildfire moments because that's what everybody's talking about right now.
We got some wildfire.
Why don't you start with that?
The damage is not that bad. We can rebuild. We can rebuild. King's Landing can be rebuilt.
Is this your pitch?
Follow me.
You're going to govern from the middle?
Yeah, that's right.
You're gonna
Jason sells insurance on the side, so.
I mean, the major thing that I was thinking as I was watching Drogon just take King's Landing apart piece by piece was Dany should have flown not even all of her dragons, just one over the Red Keep at the beginning of last season.
7.
And just melted the castle down.
Yeah.
And then fly away, and that's it. We're done. We're done. No sack of the city.
Yeah.
No mass loss of life. We're finished. It's over. War's over. Everybody go home.
So your wildfire moment is essentially the sacking of the city, but your thought about it is that, like, did we need to wait this long?
Look
for
how easy that would have been.
Well, we talked about this. We
Yeah.
talked about Dany having a power problem on this show a little
Yeah.
bit, right? Like that they needed to level the playing field to some extent. Not that it seems like it worked at all.
Well, I think we can now say with the clarity of what we've seen that they needed to do more than just that. They
Yeah.
needed to position the final betrayal, which will be Jon turning on Dany in the finale of Game of Thrones and removing her from power, because you cannot let her rule after what she just did. That was slaughter. Chekhov's bells. We got Chekhov's bells mentioned 3 different times, I believe.
I
by
think
Tyrion.
I think when do you think Chekhov officially rolled over in his grave when Tyrion was like, "Ring the bell"?
Somewhere between crypts
Ring
and
the bell.
bells, I think. You know, we have debated and will continue
Yeah.
to debate whether Dany's ultimate turn to
Right.
Queen of the Ashes was foreshadowed. And I think it was, but there's a chasm between that
Yeah.
and what happened here.
I mean, the signifier that she was going to do it was like, she basically, her hair was kind of messed up and she was just sitting on Drogon being like,
Circled under her eyes, hadn't been eating, seemed she was getting pretty.
and then she was
agitated,
like, I'm going to do it, forget about it.
yeah. She knew that the bells signaled surrender.
Sure.
And she burned the city to the ground, knowing that there were innocent people. She did not make a beeline for the Red Keep, even at that point, after destroying the fleet, after destroying all of those, not big, but bigger.
Right.
Bigger crossbows.
Right.
Also, by the way, this hardly feels important now, but it still is, and we should not lose sight of it. Just makes last week's Rhaegal death
I know.
even harder to swallow.
How easy
Because
would-
look at what Drogon did
Right.
when he was unleashed.
Just
It's
took them all, took it apart.
Well, now that she knows that they had them, she knew, okay, I have to like
Right.
change like elevation.
She knew that they
I-
had them from Spoils of War when she first faced Bronn firing one at Drogon in
true.
season 7.
That's
But
true.
that's
Maybe
fine.
she didn't know they
It was
mass
smaller.
produced them. So
Yeah.
you guys, your wildfire moment is obviously Dany Breaking Bad.
And yes, destroying the city.
Has to be.
I'm gonna go with my wildfire moment as the deaths of Cersei and Jaime Lannister, who were
That's
two of
crazy.
my favorite
Devastating.
characters on this show. And I think in some ways, at the end of things, they have been the only true love story this show's got. You know, they died in each other's arms, which
They
is
did, just like Jamie said he wanted to.
more than anybody else in this show seems to get.
That
So.
was really sad.
No, it was really sad, and they like the dialogue at the end with Jamie saying "only us" and it echoed something he's been saying throughout the series. It
Yeah,
turns out
you
he
and
was
me.
not head faking Brienne. That was not about making sure he's settled all Lannister debts before he came back and lived happily ever after as a cobbler in Winterfell. He wanted to die with his sister, and he got his wish.
Well, he wanted to save her, and then when that proved impossible, this was the only choice that was left to them. I think that we've spent a lot of time over the course of Game of Thrones talking about fathers sons, parents, children, what you inherit and what you choose to be. And this was an episode in a lot of ways that there's still time, there's still one more episode to tell us what the message of the story actually is, but this was an episode in a lot of ways that said, it's your nature, not your nurture.
Right.
You can try to change, you can try to do something else, but you are who you are.
Or at the very, maybe even worse than that, it's a coin toss.
We got the coin toss line.
Right.
An allusion to the prior coin toss line. We'd heard it before
Yeah.
from Cersei in the past about the Targaryens and madness, thinking about her own family and incest and Joffrey and whether they were paying the price for their sins. Then, of course, we hear it here, referencing Dany. Now we've had plenty of time and reason to think about Targaryen madness in the course of the story. We got the nice smash cut of all of the lines in the previously on, all the times in the past the characters have wondered about Dany, or more importantly about her father, to show her that she didn't have to be that way. But that's what happened in this episode. That's who she became.
Okay, so Dany Breaking Bad, Cersei and Jaime together. Also, something we've basically been looking forward to for most of the show, if not obviously for book readers even longer than that, was Clegane, which
That was dope.
honestly,
pretty fun.
it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
like,
pretty fun.
I guess awesome is a weird word. Like, I'm not gonna go home and watch it again for fun, but
I will.
like, it was pretty cool.
Savagely violent. Maybe
Yeah.
the most violent episode of Game of
Ravens
Thrones.
Steelers, rather than like a kind of shootout there. Like,
This was a really violent episode of television. It
extremely
was
violent.
savage.
that's the thing. We'll get more into like how we kind of felt about the episode itself as we get into Ravenscroll. But before that, let's get into Winds of Twitter, which is what everybody is saying out there. One of our own people out here. We got you. First of all, Jamel Hill. So Jamel says, so the only thing Dany had to do was fly faster.
Well, she also, again, as we noted, she did the Harrenhal move, which is fly straight down out of the sun onto the boat, so
Right.
they couldn't really get a beat on her.
Right, use the overcast weather to her advantage. Our own Haley O'Shaughnessy says Sansa is watching this all unfold through Bran's IG live brain like I tried to tell you. Haley invoking social media there for Sansa. And Craig Jenkins says, if I'm working on Thrones, the minute Arya sets sight on the horse, we are blasting Old Town Road. We did not get that song drop.
They can do it in post like they did the coffee cup.
That's right. Let's get into Ravenscroll. That's where we go through the entire episode scene by scene and kind of walk you through what we just saw. Obviously, this was probably the most visceral episode that, we've had incredible action sequences, we've had tragic moments, we've had moments of unspeakable violence and loss. Never maybe 51 moments of those things one after another. It was sustained and it was unrelenting, but we had some quiet before that, and a lot of that circled around this betrayal that Varys has committed, this betrayal of Dany. We see him writing a letter in Dragonstone in the beginning of the episode, talking.
He'd been writing a few. He had a few.
He had
Informing the realm, essentially.
right.
BCC'd a couple people on that one, and he talks to Martha the spy.
Good old Martha. Love the
and-
little birds.
What's the quote that he says? Basically, like it's essentially like the greater the risk, the greater the yeah. John Varys shoots a shot. As soon as John arrives on Dragonstone, he just like literally walks up to him and is like, "Hey, I know your secret."
Right.
Thought it was a really nice moment by Kit there to kind of be like, "God damn it, Sansa."
I'm out.
Yeah. And also was just like, look, this is our opportunity
Right.
to stop what is going to happen from happening. What did you guys think of the way that the Varys betrayal Jason, the way that whole thing kind of worked itself out, and his sort of direct approach?
It was nice to see Varys working, and I would have hoped that over the earlier part of this season he would have been working. Like, I guess we are just to assume that he was writing letters to the
constant.
noble houses of Westeros saying, Dany's here, change course now, support her, and you will be rewarded, right?
Yeah.
We're to assume he was doing that the whole time?
Well, the most meaningful moment that he got in the first 3 episodes, other than cowering in the crypts, was when he and Tyrion and Davos were looking out at Jon and Dany, and he had that kind of existential philosophical moment. Respect is how the young keep us at a distance so we don't remind them of an unpleasant truth. And Tyrion said, what is that? Nothing lasts. Well, he was right. Nothing does last, including the dream in Dany as a savior.
Thank God he was right about something in the end.
Tyrion goes to Dany, says, hey,
Yep.
look, there's been a betrayal. It is probably the darkest of foreshadowing that she immediately thinks
John.
everybody, or John, but also by proxy you, and by
Right.
proxy John's sister, and like she's just like, who hasn't betrayed me at this point? And that's the introduction we get to the Mad Queen.
I want to talk about this for a moment.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I think that this is a really, really crucial distinction to draw between positioning Dany as an evil tyrant who is unhinged and not in control of her faculties, and positioning Dany as a tragedy,
Right.
which is the direction that I think, knowing that this was inevitable, as it clearly has been all season, that we were hoping it would go. This is a tragedy. And reminding us of how many times Dany has been betrayed is an essential part of that. It's an essential part of her narrative. What does she want her whole life? To go home. You know, in the book, she thinks often of this red door from their childhood home in Braavos and everything that represented to her: safety, peace, comfort. And she never had that again. And finally, she gets home to Westeros, the place that she's been trying to get to the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's the moment, not when it all comes together, but when everything is ripped away from her. When all the people who she spent her whole life saying, I just need to get to them and they'll help me, fall away. When she loses Jorah and Missandei, the only people she trusts. She's a broken person. She has no reason to believe in these people. And I just think ultimately that direction is a much more tragically and thus satisfying way to
Rather
think
than she
about her
just
character
snaps.
than she snaps.
I don't think. Yeah.
My thing is, I don't.
The groundwork is laid for one.
The groundwork is laid. I still don't think her snapping is like earned. I could buy her.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, I could buy her not flaming the entire city and then executing Jon, maybe, or executing Varys and executing Tyrion and being like, I want to kill Sansa, doing all that kind of stuff. But like, remember season 1 of Game of Thrones? The thing that got her in trouble with the Dothraki was she was like, stop all this slaughter of the Lazarene.
Right.
Like, don't do this.
Right.
That kind of thing is totally antithetical to who she is. Like, yes, she might snap and
exactly
kill high-ranking people who she deems guilty of betraying her or other crimes. But like, blaming an entire population is just not a thing she would do.
I don't want to just always bring up Jorah.
Can I throw a counter out there?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
Because we can jump ahead a little bit and come back in this
Yeah.
episode here. We're doing Raven Scroll, but we're going to talk a little bit about this. Dany, I thought that the conversation with Jon was pretty crucial, at least in that I actually felt very deeply for her in that moment. When
Yeah.
she's just
yeah.
like, they don't love me the way they love you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
And that
gutting.
Everybody else that she's come across in her ascent here has loved her. The people at least have, for the most part, right? The people that she's freed, the people that she's brought
Sure.
onto her side, she's largely been viewed as you're the monarch, you're the you're the one, you're the princess who was promised. Whatever you want to say, like the stallion, all of these prophecies are true in you, and she gets to, you're saying, this final checkpoint, and there's another, like that. That obviously flips her wig.
She basically said as much to Jon last
Yeah.
episode when she said, I've seen, when this is
Yes.
in reference to the toast that Tormund made and everybody celebrating Jon's achievements, and she said, I recognize that because I used to have it. I'm used to that, except I've never gotten it here. I've never gotten it since I crossed the Narrow Sea. What's that akin to saying? I've never gotten that since I returned home to the place that I thought I belonged. And then, what you're saying here also reminds me of the exchange that she had with Varys and Tyrion last episode, that Varys and Tyrion then referenced about this idea of destiny. And that is ultimately the difference between Jon and Dany.
Right.
Is that Jon doesn't believe that he's this destined hero. He doesn't want it, and Dany does. Dany does believe that, and I think that message is actually really true to the story that George R.R. Martin is trying to tell. We saw that a lot with Cersei. What happens when you believe in prophecy? What happens when you think that you're the one who's meant to rule and lead and save? Now, that doesn't negate the fact that Dany often had very noble intentions. She was a liberator, but the line between liberator and conqueror was always as thin as the edge of a blade.
Yeah.
And she lost the ability this season to see the difference.
Yeah. What was the letter that Varys burned? So he's sitting there in his chambers, right? And we're in Raven Scroll, and we're going scene by scene. There's that moment right before Grey Worm comes for him that he's taking off his rings and he burns a
Gotta
letter.
save the jewelry.
Gotta save the jewelry.
I mean-
that's a very like
Martha needs her
it's a
payment.
very,
Save the
it's a very Donnie Brasco move.
I know.
Right?
I know.
Where Pacino like takes off his jewelry and leaves it for his wife, takes his wallet out, is like, I think it was probably just another one of those letters. You know, he's just wanted to make sure that if any of these actually had names of people attached
Then she would
to
go
them.
after him.
Right, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so that was the one he got and got caught writing, and that's the one. Okay, that makes sense. So, like we just talked about, Dragonstone, Dany's chambers, Dany and Grey Worm, remember Missandei, and she burns, Grey Worm burns her, was that like her shackles?
Yeah,
like,
her shackles.
Yeah, and
Neck chain.
John comes and they have this conversation, and she's essentially like, you can either rule through fear or through love. And he says, well, you're my queen, and you know, I still ride for you. And there's a moment of intimacy that John recoils from, I guess.
Yeah.
And she says, fine, let it be fear. Now,
You remember what Viserys said back in season 1 about fear? Who can rule without wealth or fear or love? So Dany, the reason that he was saying that is because he had witnessed that Dany had love, a thing he never had. And this was a moment where Dany chose, after being driven to that point, but chose ultimately, like I think it's important to not lose sight of the fact that the characters have agency, to choose fear. You know, to choose violence. I choose violence. That's a Cersei idea. We've heard Cersei say that.
but is the moment there that she will never be able to truly be with John? Because obviously he just can't get his head around it. So in that case, she's truly alone.
Yeah, John, I mean, certainly, yes, that's foreshadowing what was to come. And then certainly after seeing the sack, John is
Turned off.
the break between them is final.
So here's the thing about what happened with Sansa. Dany is
The secret
positioning,
stuff.
yes,
Yeah.
Dany
Yeah.
is positioning that in that moment to Jon as you failed. But we have to account for what Jon is thinking, which is, wow, I begged them to keep this secret,
Right.
and they're that afraid of Dany. They mistrust her that much that Sansa told anyway. One of the key relationships, season 6, 7, and 8 in the show, is Jon and Sansa. They are very rarely on the same page, but a thing that we know is that they trust and respect each other.
Right.
And so Jon has to be considering the fact that Sansa would make that choice and what that would mean, and heeding that in some level, deep down, even if he's not quite ready to even consciously acknowledge it. Also, he's still like, I don't want to have sex with my aunt.
Right,
She's
right.
fine with that, and he just isn't.
I want to briefly mention here, as we're going through this first half of the episode, that I thought this was an incredible Dinklage episode, that I thought he was quite good, and that in a lot of ways, I always feel like he's kind of like, to some extent, an audience avatar and also
Right, yeah,
a bridge
for
to
sure.
like the non-Thrones world. The way he talks, the way Dinklage acts, the way he is present in scenes feels very relatable in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And I thought he was excellent in this first half of this episode. He didn't have a
Relatable, like you would also just be walking through a battle scene without
I did
any
not
sort of
need.
protection
I don't
or
think that
reason.
was a wise choice necessarily, but he loves standing on hills and watching things, burn and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He is a King's Landing vet. So
We have notes. Take shelter.
But Tyrion tells Dany that the people of King's Landing are innocent and they should not be burned to death.
Yes.
And he brings up this bell plan.
Yep.
The bell.
Yeah.
The bells.
Bells.
She also mentions to him that she has captured Jaime, and that
Yes.
the next time he makes a mistake, the next time he fails her will be the last time. This is Dany to Tyrion.
Yep.
So it's really the fourth quarter for every character we've got now. On the landing coast in King's Landing, Tyrion and Jon, they meet up with the Northern forces, and Jon says Dany wants to attack now. They're going to wait for the Northern armies to arrive. Arya and the Hound arrive in the Northern camp. And they pretty much Jedi their way through it.
Right, they're
which
like-
was
I mean, you don't even need to Jedi your way through it. These
She's Arya
Northern
Stark.
guards are morons. What are they doing?
She is Arya Stark. Like, what are you going to do, arrest her?
Well, I mean, in season 7, when she showed
Yeah.
up at Winterfell, they were like, just have a seat here.
Right.
Yeah.
She vanished in 2 seconds. Of course, also a throwback to King's Landing in season
Yeah.
1 after she runs through, the dragon skulls that we saw and then back out and tries to get in. This is a theme with Arya, but
Yeah.
it's also a theme that none of the guards who were supposed to be protecting
not good.
anybody know what they're doing. Also, Jaime ended up walking right through the Golden
Well, that's
Company.
the-
So, like,
right.
what is everyone doing?
Right.
Yeah.
He's maybe the most recognizable man in the Seven
Well, he was
Kingdoms.
actually flashing
Well,
the digits for a while.
I mean,
there.
we'll get to this in a second, but that also holds for Tyrion dismissing the Unsullied from outside Jaime's jail
Yeah.
tent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, hey, Tyrion has sprung Jaime from jail before, so maybe just like they're brothers
Maybe
also.
that wasn't in the Unsullied newsletter.
Right,
You know,
check the notes, they're brothers. Don't let them near each other.
I mean, you have to wonder almost if it was a test from Dany
Yeah.
to Tyrion, you know, that she almost expected it and is looking for an excuse. You know, let's not lose sight of the fact that we made fun last episode of Tyrion for once again thinking it was worth appealing to Cersei's better nature, going to the gates of King's Landing, reminding her that she had a child, yada, 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 yada. Ridiculous. But we were also like, well, why would Dany agree to it? Because she said, you know, they should know whose fault it is when the sky falls down on them. She wanted Cersei to take the blame. Maybe she wanted Tyrion to take the blame and was setting him up here.
JC, any notes on, or any thoughts on Jaime, what would be Jaime and Tyrion's last scene together?
That was actually quite emotional, but also, you know, I do struggle I think that's a great point that maybe Dany was like, let's see if Tyrion goes for it. Let's see how many people betray me here. I do struggle to understand what Tyrion's endgame would have been. Yes, I love my brother, I want to free him. There's honestly no situation here whether Dany does or does not destroy the entire city, wins with minimal bloodshed, wins by killing everyone, where if he frees Jaime, Tyrion survives.
Right.
Like, she will kill him.
Right.
And rightly so, right?
Yeah.
So
mean,
I do struggle to understand what his end game would have been.
He
there.
seemed to be going for the highest degree of difficulty plan possible. It was not only am I going to get Jaime sprung, possibly sneak Cersei out of King's Landing, also everything hinges on this Bell and Gate situation, which at the end of the day, if he probably should have known the queen to whom he is the hand better, if he thought that was what was going to be the final decider.
He should have known everyone.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's literally his thing.
Yeah,
I drink and I know things.
Right.
I have a T-shirt that says that. It's his line. And at the end of the day, he didn't know anybody.
Right.
Most damningly of all, including himself.
Yeah.
Because until the last moment, he chose to side with Dany, and he obviously shouldn't have. And I hate saying that because Dany's a really important character in my life. I don't want to be saying that, but him going up to Varys and saying, it was me, I did it. I turned you in. I chose her over you in this other plan was a tragic mistake based on what happened, and he's going to have to live with that for as long as he lives, which...
I mean, what was honestly
10 more minutes?
But
I don't know.
honestly, what was the other move? Like, convince Jon to turn on Dany and bring her down? That's the only other move, and Jon wouldn't have done it.
He had his chance to make that move.
Jon
and it was
wouldn't have
when
done it.
Varys was like, we have to choose, and we're both going to make our choices. Hopefully, it's the same choice.
I mean, unless it's like poison Dany, then
Yeah.
the Unsullied string you up. Like, there's. He was between a rock and a hard place. There was like no situation where he survives that.
So we failed to mention that Varys was also incinerated by a dragon.
Wow. That was
very, very keep it thorough
chill-inducing.
scene. Like, that was amazing.
That was-
Drogon rising out behind.
Is that the exact moment that the Sixers lost, or?
Oh wow.
No, I saved that joke for later in the episode. I think when Jamie. Thanks for bringing that up, though.
You're welcome.
That would be my loser of the week. Okay, so let's just get to the battle. So we're at King's Landing. There's been a lot of sneaky entrances inside of the city by Jaime, by Arya and the Hound. Got citizens running around trying to get safe. Gates are closing. Everybody's got their scorpions ready. And it turns out, like, Drogon is all you need. And Drogon takes out the Iron Fleet, takes out all the scorpions on the walls, and then somehow gets behind one of the walls and explodes out and wipes out the Golden Company in pretty much 30 seconds.
So the answer to the somehow is that he is a dragon and can fly, and thus she could have done this, to Jason's point, at any point. You know, we cite the Harrenhal thing and the death of Harren the Black often because that's what happened, is that Aegon went all the way up and then back down so that they roasted inside of the castle.
Yeah.
Became an oven, the molten stone. And again, that hubris, I think that would have been a nice mirror, well, it is ultimately a nice mirror image for Cersei, you know, literally, the house that she refused to let go of crumbling around her. What if it had been cloudy? This is my question. Like, not like it was cloudy, obviously there was that haze, but part of it was that there was this blot of sun.
I just want to know,
Drogon.
who is Dany's weatherman? We're thinking a little bit of a cold front coming in and then Dragon fire!
Obviously, nothing would have stopped Drogon ultimately, but and again, this is a harkening back to the past, something like the Field of Fire, a legendary battle. While Aegon knew that it hadn't rained in weeks and that the wheat and the grass was going to catch on fire, was Dany just like, I know this is my moment because I can come in through the sun and get that initial lead and then never let go?
I mean,
big moment for weather.com.
Yeah, exactly. Dany and Drogon burn through the gates. They burn the Golden Company. Her army enters through the...
Wait! We gotta talk about the Golden Company.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the Golden Company.
There's nothing to say.
Harry Strickland, my dude! You did it. What an entrance for Harry Strickland. The best mercenary group Essos has to offer. Wow.
Turns out they should have broken a contract. Golden Company, we have some notes. You should have actually broken a contract.
Harry Strickland.
I mean, literally like that.
They seemed, as you would be, incredibly shook by dragon sounds.
Yeah.
But, like, if I'm paying top dollar to the Iron Bank, reversing those charges onto the Golden Company, I expect
then
a
it's
little
like,
bit of intestinal fortitude in the face of supernatural creatures.
Unbelievable.
I mean, Blackfire bloodlines, they should be excited to see a dragon.
I gotta
That's my
say,
take.
it's like hilarious. Absolutely hilarious that they introduced the Golden Company and Harry Strickland, gave him a line,
It's astonishing.
and then turned him to dust in the first 10 seconds of the attack. It was awesome.
So we get into
Amazing.
King's Landing. Jon and Grey Worm lead their forces, approach the last stand of the Lannister men. Tyrion walks through the remains of the Golden Company.
Sure.
So it was a nice allusion to the moment after Spoils of War,
Right.
after the Battle of the Golden Road, where because he's observing and then he's walking
He
through
sees
the
Jaime,
carnage.
yeah.
He sees, and that is a moment where, now looking back, and we know this because of what ended up happening with Randall and Dickon when Tyrion tried to... Dickon tried to stop Dany from burning them. Tyrion was walking around and taking in the carnage and was horrified thinking about the strength and what that strength could do. The Targaryen words are fire and blood. This is not a secret. Aegon and his sisters are these mythical figures of lore, but guess what? How did they unite the Seven Kingdoms?
Fire and blood.
Fire and blood.
It's right there in the words on the shields.
So there's basically this moment, this pause, where there's a last standoff between the Lannister men and the Unsullied and the Northern armies.
Right.
Dany's flying around. Cersei seems to comes to the realization that she is losing. Qyburn informs her, we're out of scorpions.
Qyburn.
Euron's dead.
Quietly the funniest moment in the history of Game of Thrones. Just a laundry list of all the things that the show spent all this time building up as actually being real threats to Dany and her strength. And then it was just like,
I know. Euron.
I regret to inform you.
Euron could only needs one lucky shot.
Yeah.
We don't know where Euron is, and all the scorpions are dead, or destroyed, Your Grace.
We made them bigger, but not big enough.
Yeah.
That was wild.
So there's this moment where it's really all on the line. Will Dany do what Tyrion begged her to do, which is essentially, if there is a surrender, will you kind of walk in as a cheered conqueror rather than a feared demigorgon flying on a dragon, burning everything up?
The bells ring,
and
then
So
really
many
fun
bells.
moment.
get in tight on my face.
Yeah.
Hold on.
This is his Dany Targaryen, by the way. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah! And then she
She
just
goes
does
after
it.
it. She goes after it. Now there was a lot of really good closed captioned dialogue from townsfolk.
Ring the bells!
Hey,
A lot of
Ring the bells!
please ring the bells.
Please ring the bells, and it's over.
Hey, no, seriously, I really don't want to die in
Ring
fire.
the
Like, she
bells,
told me to ring the
please.
bells.
The Lannister soldiers that Cersei had just told Qyburn would ultimately have more fortitude than
Drop
the
their
Golden
swords.
Company. Drop their swords, which is, again, comical, but also is important because it is literally, not kind of, literally them surrendering. So the enemy army has surrendered.
Yes.
That's what the bells mean. We've also seen them throw down their spears. Crucially, Jon is right across from them. It's not just Grey Worm and the Unsullied. Jon is seeing that his enemy has surrendered.
What if she's flying 30,000 feet in the air? ears popping.
She came down.
What if
She's
she
on
didn't hear it?
She was
She's
sitting
not.
on the
She's
wall.
sitting on the
But she was
wall.
sitting
Yeah,
on the
but
wall.
no, but I'm saying like she came down, like her ears might have still been popped, but she didn't hear
Chew
it.
gum if you're going on an airplane.
Yeah,
What if
seriously.
she didn't hear
Hold
it?
your nose and blow to level the pressure.
Come on.
You'll be fine. I think that.
Are we sure
Use
she
some
heard it?
noise canceling headphones.
This is
She
a good
definitely
Reddit.
heard it?
You should take this to Reddit.
Yeah,
She heard it.
This is good.
But basically, obviously, we saw what happened. What we saw was essentially Game of Thrones' version of a nuclear war. Like it was essentially, she rendered King's Landing into King's Ashes. She flew over the city, burning innocent women and children and soldiers and probably some of her own soldiers, and
Yeah.
like lit the place up. Thus, pretty much ending the union that had been forged between her and Jon.
John's soldiers taking part in the sack
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
He did try to stop them.
He could have said before the attack, hey guys, just as a sidebar, if it goes sideways in there, do not, and I repeat, do not, kill soldiers who surrender and women and children. Just don't do it. Because I gotta say, trying to stop that in the heat of the battle is gonna be a high degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
Is gonna be tough. Yes,
Yeah.
he tried to stop it, but it's like his voice, how far does his voice carry?
Oh my God! So much of this hinges on what people can hear.
I know,
in the Long Night, the
like-
Battle of Winterfell, it's pitch black, and Davos can see Melisandre
But like these
coming from
AirPods,
across
they
the field.
sometimes they don't link. You know what I mean? It's like it's just gotta wait for it to go ding. Like,
To your point,
Yeah.
I would like to quote my favorite philosopher,
do you have one?
Jorah Mormont.
R.I.P. Rest in power.
Thomas Rawls, but
I know,
Jorah Mormont.
R.I.
John
a different
Rawls.
P for Mallory.
There's a beast in every man, right? And it stirs when you put a sword in his hand. We saw painfully the truth of
Yes,
that in
we
this
did.
episode.
Yeah.
Painfully.
I think that the thing that really starts to hit you when this happens is when we do like prep for these episodes or when we do podcasts about this stuff, and you kind of go through your research or you go back and watch older episodes and you hear characters talking about sacks of this city,
Yeah.
dragons doing this to this place or whatever. You kind of have it in your imagination, but it's almost like one of those things that snaps you back into like, oh yeah, this would be terrible to live in this kind of
Right,
situation.
it'd be
I mean,
really
this is Book of Revelation stuff, and it kind of goes past like, wow, that was sick. The Knights of the Vale came in, saved
Yeah, yeah.
them. You know, like it gets into like, this is kind of hell on earth for these people,
Yeah.
and maybe there is no leader who's going to bring salvation to any of them.
I think that's kind of the thing I kept coming back to is that, yes, the story had set up Dany as being this kind of revolutionary leader who's going to break the wheel and carry out warfare in a way that Westeros has never seen, a more humane kind of warfare, right? At the same time, this is what we saw was how every conflict in Westeros has unfolded every single time.
Yeah.
Literally, Cersei's father did this at the end of Robert's Rebellion, did that to the city with swords in their hand, just destroyed, decimated the population, burned the town, raped and murdered. Like,
Yeah.
this is how it happens there. So, on the one hand, it is a tragedy that Dany, who we held up to have, higher morals and better
Messianic
ideals,
kind of, yeah.
would do this. At the same time, it's kind of like all of your fathers have done this. Like something the Hound has brought up, like your fathers are murderers, your brothers
all
are murderers.
killers.
Right.
They're all killers.
Right.
That is true.
I found myself thinking again about what the actual core message of the story is. Because George R.R. Martin's books, as violent as they are, have a clear anti-war message. A clear one. You
Right.
think of a character like the Broken Man and everything that he says about the real victims, the real carnage. And the show has had moments where it's tried to engage with that idea. Something like Varys talking about all of the innocent people, the people who were going to suffer. And then you think of a moment like the Broken Man episode of Game of Thrones, Ray, Ian McShane. Turns out he was right. It was just tits and dragons.
T's and
ultimately.
D's.
What an icon. Violence is a disease, right? That was what Ray said to the Hound. You don't cure a disease by spreading it to more people. And that's a really powerful idea. What's the tragedy of that moment? It's that the Hound responds to that by picking up an axe and heading off to war. So we understand what that message is, but do the characters. And Dany, again, positioned herself as the person who was going to rid the world of tyrants. but she became one. She became one.
I would still say that this was a pretty anti-war message episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I think that one of the things I really found interesting was how characters besides Dany had moments of clarity that came just a few minutes too late. I mean, Arya lives, but gets to the sort of precipice of being able to kill Cersei when the Hound is like, look what you're going to turn into if you keep following this along. And then she gets trapped in the worst place on earth, the worst place she could possibly be, with buildings falling on her and people getting burned up in front of her and getting knocked into structures left and right. And the same thing sort of happens for Cersei at the very end, where she kind of finally has this is not how I want to die, I don't want to be here anymore, I need to get out of here. She had many opportunities to do that, and the world fell down around these characters' feet before they could get what they wanted ultimately. We're going to talk about Jaime and Euron once we get into their fight. This is the Raven Scroll, so we're going through scene by scene. There have been a couple of hey, there's this other part of Game of Thrones that is not on the show right now, but they mentioned the Prince of Dorne last week. This week,
Shouts to Prince of Dorne, whatever your name is.
Qyburn, he's
Honestly
just
incredible.
really pulling well in Dorne. Qyburn tells Cersei that the Red Keep isn't safe. Nada. Yeah. And then he says,
Helpful.
I suggest we go to Maegor's Holdfast as a better place to ride out the storm. So that brings us to the higher mysteries, which is when we like to get Jason to explain some stuff to
Let's
us.
talk about it. So the Red Keep and Maegor's Holdfast. The Red Keep is the castle in which the royal family reigns from. So there's King's Landing, which is the city. On one corner of the city, there is the Red Keep. The castle itself contains the throne room, etc. And then within the Red Keep is Maegor's Holdfast. You can think of it as a castle within the castle. The strongest part of that fortification, surrounded by a moat with spikes in it. When Sansa is taken to see Ned's head by Joffrey, they're standing on one of the battlements of Maegor's Holdfast. So that's the place where, if it all goes to shit, the royal family would hold tight in there. That's where the royal apartments are. That's
It's the panic room.
It's the panic room.
Right.
Now, the Red Keep was built over several decades. During the early reign of the Targaryens, Aegon, when he landed in King's Landing, there was just nothing there. It was just like a fishing village and a hill. So he built like a wooden fortress there. Aegon Fort.
Like Marfa.
Right.
Yeah.
Over time, that got built up. Maegor the Cruel. Basically, the Red Keep was completed during the time of Maegor the Cruel. Maegor's Holdfast named in his honor. He famously had all the contractors who worked on it killed. Cool guy. Now, Cersei says the Red Keep has never fallen. It won't today. Cersei, notably not a student of history, she would have known that it has fallen.
Notably not.
Her father, in fact, helped it fall.
I think she died regretting not knowing more history.
Yeah, I think maybe. So at the end of
I wish I
Robert,
could have read more. I never found the time.
At the end of Robert's Rebellion, Tywin appears at the gates of King's Landing, is like, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And they throw open the gates of the city, and shocker, he's not there to help. His forces begin pillaging and destroying the entire city. He sends some handpicked men to the Red Keep to make sure that they can get in. They do that. Then he sends the Mountain and I think Armory Lorch to Maegor's Holdfast. They scale the walls. They get in there. They kill the royal family. Famously, the Mountain, just as he did with Qyburn, rapes and murders Elia Martell and kills the Targaryen babes. So Cersei, the Red Keep has fallen in the past, and your dad did it. Sorry about it.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the other times that King's Landing has been sacked? I mean, obviously that move by Tywin, has it ever fallen before, other than when during the rebellion?
There was Cregan Stark during the Dance of the Dragons was invited in after numerous things had happened, which resulted in the poisoning of the king, and he was then invited in by the next boy Targaryen king in line to kind of stabilize the situation, and then he basically took control for a fortnight, which is called an Hour of the Wolf. Not technically a sack, although there have been numerous times where assassins have been sent into the Red Keep and Maegor's Holdfast and have actually gotten in and killed people. But this is the first. But Tywin Lannister and the sack of King's Landing is the first time really that it has actually been sacked and you can say that it had fallen.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that all these examples that you're talking about all had some procedural element to it. You know what I mean? Like, invite us in, or like if you hear the bells, or you know, like for as much as it's a military conflict, there's still this weird like comedy of manners going on with it. So that's pretty fascinating. All right, let's talk about the Euron and Jaime fight on the outskirts of King's Landing. Let me put it this way. This is one thing. This is my take on this moment.
Okay.
There was right before he dies, Euron stares up at the sky and he goes, "I'm the man who killed Jaime Lannister." Right. And I saw a much, much more interesting version of this character on the show.
Euron.
Yeah. The Robert Ford to Jaime's Jesse James. Like,
wow.
what if he had been just like obsessed with Jaime's notoriety, his practical celebrity, his girlfriend, or however you want to, his sister. But like, what if it was more about, I am jealous of you, I envy everything you have, and I envy the fame around the idea of being the Kingslayer, and that's what's driving me to do this, rather than just like, I have a big D and I love sailing, you know?
That's actually a really interesting idea, because you think back to when Euron and Jaime first met.
Finger in the bum.
Finger in the bum.
Yeah.
But Euron mentions, the siege of the Iron Islands during. So after Robert's Rebellion, the Iron Islands took that opportunity to basically be like, we're free too, and Robert had to send a fleet over there and sack the Iron Islands. And during that, Jaime killed a lot of people, a lot of Ironborn.
That was like his McDonald's All-American.
And Euron
right?
mentions it, saying like, "Oh, I saw you cutting down people." That actually would have been interesting if he had carried some sort of grudge about that forward and been like, "Finally, I get the person who had killed so many Ironborn, killed members of my family, etc." But that, they didn't go that route. They went the big D route.
I mean, he references the Siege of Pike to Jaime directly, and is like, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know? He, on the show, is ultimately just a madman in pursuit of violence and power. I think one of the great surprises of season 8 is that Euron did not betray Cersei. I'm not afraid to admit that I was really wrong about that. I was certain heading into the season that either he would try to use the Golden Company and say, well, the letter of the contract is that I assigned them, something like that. Because
that would have been great if Game of Thrones ended with contract law.
But here's the thing. Maybe it would have been great, because isn't that what that idea of breaking the wheel actually is about? I keep thinking about Zach Cram has been writing about this a lot on The Ringer. Read all of his articles. Read all of our articles. The Ringer, great website. This idea that George R.R. Martin worshipped Tolkien, but also wanted to change the paradigm of what he had built. What was Aragorn's tax policy, right? That was a crucial difference in the story that he was trying to tell. And it's just funny right now at the end of the adaptation of the story to think back to how he thought about it at the beginning, which was, I want to make something that can never be adapted. Because it was too vast and too sprawling. Now, what's one of the problems? Maybe he's never going to finish his own books, which is, like, honestly a tragedy, and I really hope he does. Rooting for you, George. But the scope of the show had to narrow, or they thought it had to narrow, to the point where they could end it. And part of the way they did that was by simplifying these characters, like Euron, who were introduced late. Well, he's this one thing, and that's all you have to consider when you're thinking about him. And then, that's unfortunate, but the real loss there, the real thing that suffers, is the characters who were always so full, also being reduced down to that one note or two notes of the essence of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into screenwriting and screen acting that are very focused on, well, what's my motivation? Or what does this character want? Or what is this scene trying to accomplish, that in novels does not necessarily, I mean, it comes into play, but it's more multifaceted in a novel. You can have, first of all, a ton more interiority. And you can also have a lot more just going on in terms of like narrative functionality of scenes. They don't necessarily always have to be there to be like, we moved the ball 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Every time this scene is gonna move this forward. Let's talk about something that for book readers, for show watchers, for everybody, has been something that we've been thinking about for years, which is Clegane Bowl, which had an almost like Pacific Rim quality to it at a certain point.
It really did, yeah, it's a great way to put it.
There's crap falling from the sky, like literally moving characters out of the way to make it happen, knocking Qyburn into...
Brutal beat for our dude Qyburn at the end there.
And they finally get after it. They finally start fighting. The Hound finds out that the Mountain cannot be stabbed.
Very reminiscent of Jon fighting the White in season 1 in Mormont's office, just stabbing him, nothing's happening. You know, thinking of a moment like Osha telling her story about what happened to her man and how he hardly seemed to feel it when the blade went in. Another good reminder of the depth of the magic and fantasy elements in the story when they are actually brought to the fore. All these different kinds of rebirth, all these different kinds of reanimated creatures in the story. He's not obviously the same as the Whites in the Night King's army, but he's not a human being either.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a monster. He's someone else's creation.
Although clearly has some form of agency which we did not ascribe to him before.
Because he ignores his orders.
Because he, for the first time, is like, I'm gonna do my own thing here.
Right.
I'm gonna, or maybe perhaps like answering some sort of like deep instinctual call to violence against his brother. Whatever the case, has a mind of his own, or displays a mind of his own, really for the first time since he's been reanimated.
There was that moment when Jaime asked if he could understand them, and he kind of twitched to Jaime, and Qyburn said, you know, he understands well enough, which was, I guess, supposed to prime us for the fact that there was something in there. But yeah, he ultimately was not just doing Cersei's bidding. He
Can
had
I
his
ask
own
a question?
agenda.
Yeah.
If you
Please.
guys hadn't had Clegane Bowl on the menu, would you have expected it? Like, did it dramatically make sense for that to be taking place even? Like, there's this idea that these two forces have to meet, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like,
How?
and also, like, there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Glad you asked this question. Because while I loved Clegane Bowl,
Yeah.
and really did think it was one of the better parts of the episode, and just visually kind of stunning
yeah.
and very upsetting, extremely violent, and while I do think it makes narrative sense for the character arcs to end that way, obviously nothing more fitting than them falling into a pit of fire. What's their origin story together? Fire, and what Gregor did to Sandor's face when they were boys. But it's another moment, another set of characters, another storyline where the choice ultimately is you actually can't escape your past.
Right.
You actually are forever defined by this thing that happened to you. That's a bummer.
I mean, that's what that's one of the Hound's last words when the Mountain takes off his helmet, or the helmet is knocked off. He says, "That's what you've always been," which is essentially like a monster.
Yeah. Okay, so on the city streets, we had some cross-cutting between Arya and the Hound, further linking their characters, which I thought was really nicely done. And Arya is trying to escape, but also help people, and is getting stampeded, and is getting buildings fall on her. She almost gets lit on fire.
I would love for Arya to start wearing a helm.
What?
Some protective headgear.
Yes, I think.
Please.
Why start now, though? I mean, John
Please.
went into the Battle of the Bastards.
We're doing Raven Scroll. We're getting
Atlas.
through this episode. We're almost there. Hashtag Talk the Thrones if you want to reach out to us. John sees all these wildfire explosions going off. Forgot about those. He tries to get the Northerners to fall back. Arya is trying to escape the city. And we go to the Dragon Skull room. Now, Jaime has found Cersei.
Can I ask you guys a question about Arya quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that? You know, because I think a lot of people
I think that's
thought,
tied to my. That's kind of tied
Continue
to my.
then.
No, it's tied to my Hound thing.
Okay.
Where I was like, I dig this, but I also don't know why she's here,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, on the
or
one
why
hand,
he couldn't have said that to her like 30 miles ago.
I think that on the one hand, a lot of people thought, okay, Arya killed the Night King, right? Arya is going to kill Cersei. Arya is this unbelievable force of nature, and she has really a truly unique skill set and is in some ways the most dangerous person in the show. I kind of liked ultimately having her in a different role in this episode and returning her. I think one of the more effective things about season 8 has been these moments where Arya has had to account for all the different parts of her humanity and return to being a person and looking at somebody next to her and saying, well, what does it mean if I just move forward instead of stopping to help you? I liked that, but also you find yourself feeling like you've been trained ultimately to expect that Arya will be able to accomplish the mission no matter what. So there was an interesting dissonance there as far as her character was concerned that I think I mostly liked, but am not totally sure about.
I liked that here's this character who has, at different times, post the House of Black and White, been basically a mass murderer. Because of where she's at, kind of truly understanding the cost of violence for the first time.
I wonder how
that I thought was actually important that we
Yeah.
get that message be there.
I think it's
And
also
I agree with that.
she bore witness to what Dany did,
Right.
and that could come into play next episode.
I would think.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and if it's Arya, that's pretty interesting. What that could mean for Dany. In the Dragon Skull room, Jaime and Cersei try to escape, but their way is blocked out.
This was devastating.
Cersei gives Jaime the look my wife gives me when I go off ways when we're driving, and I'm like, no. Fountain is totally clear this time of day. Nope. And also, I would just like to say,
Go off ways.
I would just like to say, Cersei, unlike Varys, kept the ring on. What a great chunky little piece of costume jewelry from her, because it's never too late to accessorize.
Cersei's always dressed for the occasion.
She really is.
She really is.
Moved by that moment?
Extremely. Man. Last episode feels like a long time ago already.
Yeah.
You know this because you were here with me. We were all together experiencing this in real time. Really struggled with Jaime leaving Brienne in that fashion last week. And I found myself thinking about how I was going to possibly accept that Jaime would make this choice, because I think that we have invested 8 seasons in the rehabilitation of his character and in his arc and in believing that you ultimately can be better. I think that ultimately having him say, well, I said I wanted to die in the arms of the woman that I love, it was very nice for all of us to think that could be Brienne, but it wasn't. It was Cersei. It was always Cersei, is also a really powerful thing to grapple with. It's not necessarily the outcome that I wanted, but I think that that's okay. And like a moment like this actually restores my faith in the show, because it's like, you don't need to do what I want. You just have to do something that feels true to who the characters are.
Right. Yeah,
and this felt true to who Jaime was, ultimately.
The reason why
Maybe not who we wanted him to be.
No, and
I
I agree with you. And it is an affirming thing to see in some weird way, because one of the things I really like about the show is that it doesn't have to be a binary. It doesn't have to be about you're a good guy or a bad guy, or you're redeeming yourself and can never slip back. It is kind of this more nuanced and personalized way of looking at these archetypal kind of characters.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot on Binge Mode this past week, and this idea of what Jaime thinks he deserves.
Yeah.
And I do wish that we had just gotten, again, this is where the issue of time and pacing comes in. I wish we had gotten a little more time to see him process that. Mm-hmm. Is that why he made the choice? Did he see what a different life and what happiness with a different person could look like and really say to himself, I love both of these women, but I know deep down that I only deserve one. He in essence said that to Brienne, but it was hard to tell in the moment how much of that was an effort to keep her from pursuing him, and how much of it was because he really thought it's what he believed. Something that I do like that still kind of links Jaime and Brienne, even though Jaime returned to Cersei, what did we hear Brienne say to Pod way back when? She was talking about Renly at the time, but it's a defining idea for her character. Nothing's more hateful than failing to protect the one you love. And at the end of the day, that's what Jaime tried to do.
Yeah. Ultimately, he did it for 2 people in some ways. He tried to protect Cersei, and he succeeded in protecting Brienne in some ways. Because he could have said, come with me. Let's do this together, right?
Yep. Yes. Bad episode for Tywin. That's one of my takes.
I want to hear more about that. Basically, the end of the episode was Arya alive, walking among the rubble, finds Harry Strickland's Behold a Pale Horse.
The Pale Mare.
The Pale Mare.
The Pale Mare.
We're not gonna get it.
Little nod to book readers there with the Pale Mare.
And she rides away, and we're out, and that's it. So that was Ravenscroll. That is our journey through the episode. Let's take a quick moment to remember those we lost. They were numerous this episode, with an in memoriam tribute. All right, guys, we are back. We usually take these on, these sort of eulogies, one each.
Yeah.
But I think we all have to talk about Jaime and Cersei.
Oh, those crazy kids.
Those crazy kids, they died as they lived in King's Landing.
Together.
Together. What would you say, now that their story has ended, Jason, is your kind of lasting memory or your lasting feeling on those 2?
It would probably be them boning in the broken tower at Winterfell. They were discovered by Bran. That was, the thing that defined both of their lives was their linkage. They came into the world together, in the same womb, and left together in their arms, in each other's arms. It was meant to be. You crazy kids, I'm gonna miss you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Incest really mattered, it turned out. I still think all the time about Kat finding that one strand.
The one hair, like
blonde hair up in the tower.
Kat, the PI, being like, "Whoa!"
What a gumshoe. Jaime and Cersei.
Yeah.
Two of the most important characters in the show, two of the most important characters in our lives. An incredible achievement to get us to feel sorry for Cersei here in that moment at the end.
Wow, you felt? I didn't feel sorry for her even a little.
I did.
I was like,
I really did.
Die.
Because it's, maybe sorry isn't the right way to put it, but like a pitying feeling almost. Like, again, the imagery of what was happening around them. We've gotten a lot of very overt imagery, something like the David and Goliath of Lyanna and the giant. This was literally.
I bet you I can take all the pity away. She ordered Lady's throat cut in season 1. The direwolf.
I'm not laughing at Lady dying, I'm just laughing at you getting
Specifically said, murder the direwolf. Cut its
I'd
throat.
like to be clear that I at no point was rooting for Cersei.
Cut Lady's throat.
I think, again, the nuance and the subtlety is what I really find myself like craving.
Yeah.
And it's actually, to Chris's point from a minute ago, it's not about binaries.
Right.
And there are all these degrees. And, again, another Jorah line, something about how there's good and evil on every side and every wherever thought. Cersei was never going to be good. And I'm not going to go full Tyrion here and say it was worth appealing to the goodness within her,
Sure.
but I think that it was tragic to see, what did she say to Ned? What did this all come from? When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground, and there wasn't for her, and that was what killed her.
That's a great point, because at the end of this story, maybe Cersei Lannister was the only one who stuck to her guns the whole time and was just about the things she talked about. Jaime wavered, was like, I feel bad about the things I've done. I'm going to explore this thing with Brienne. I'm going to try to be a good person. At the end, Cersei was just about it the whole time. Like, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. And she was just always, you win or you die.
And really good at conserving energy. Just spent 2 seasons standing on a balcony.
Taking that balcony air. Tywin. Let's talk about Tywin for a quick moment before we eulogize our other fallen friends here. Mm-hmm. Brutal episode for Tywin Lannister, one of the titans of the story, because what did Tywin care about above everything? Legacy!
Charles Dance is on like a Godzilla King of Monsters junket right now. Like,
I know, right?
what did I do?
What did he care about? He cared about emptying the bowels, after copulation with Shay, but also he cared about
Legacy, his legacy, yes,
legacy.
that's correct.
What is legacy? He asked Arya, it's what's left of you when you're gone. And thinking back to that scene with Tywin and Jaime when he's, again, not subtle, but skinning the stag, sigil of House Baratheon, and talking about how Jaime needed to become the man that he was meant to be. Well, in Jaime's mind, the man that he was meant to be was somebody who never left Cersei's side.
Right.
And when Tywin talked to Jaime in that scene, he said, we could establish a dynasty that will last 1,000
Dynasty.
years. Dynasty, excuse me. Or we could collapse into nothing, as the Targaryens did. Well, who's left right now of Tywin's legacy?
Tyrion.
The irony is so perfect. Tyrion, the one person that Tywin hated and loathed and didn't think was worth that proud lion banner, told him he could never inherit Casterly Rock. That's all that's left now with his family name, Tyrion. Tough beat for Tywin.
Let's do a little bit of Hound.
Oh, man.
The Hound. The Hound. Sandor Clegane. One of the more tragic characters in the story. He is a complicated figure, certainly. Would never say that he's like a great guy.
Killed Micah the Butcher's boy.
The saddle stunk for weeks. As he's happy to tell you, the saddle stunk for weeks. But at the end of the day, the Hound was quietly one of the most important characters in the story because he reminded us of how dark and painful life could be.
Right.
He reminded us in the form of this big, bulky body, this tough guy who other people were afraid to look at, that you could be afraid. That being afraid is okay because it's part of who you are, that your fears are real if you feel them. Can a man be brave if he is afraid? That is the only time a man can be brave. That's a Ned Stark idea, and the Hound reminded that of us time and time again in a way that I thought was really beautiful.
I would say, to build off that, I think one of the most important things that the Hound gave the story was just the effect of constant violence on these characters. Not only in the scars on his face and the fears that he had about fire that came from that, but just his need to escape from from his earliest appearances in the story, his need to escape this constant violence, being asked to kill people. Like his relationship with Sansa was based on, let's get out of here and let's not do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm tired of just killing kids and killing people they tell me to.
I love how that's like a
leave.
motif that keeps recurring throughout the story of like, let's you and me get out of here. Let's
Yeah.
Springsteen this and get out of here. And Dany and Jon, this idea of like the Hound and Sansa trying to do that. Jaime and Cersei at the very end trying to do that. That there's like this one last exit door that you can get out of before you hit your destiny.
But to your point about how he represented this violence and this horror, what did we heard him say it to Sansa last episode? He said it time and time again throughout the story. You couldn't even look at me because what are you looking at? You're looking at that horror. And so before you can think about taking that door, you have to stare the truth in the face. That's another idea that we've heard from Sansa. That's the most heroic thing we can do, look the truth in the face. And at the end of the day, he looked the truth of his own life in the face and said that this is the one thing that I can't let go. And I think that the tragedy there of the Hound, who we don't often think of necessarily as a tragic figure, is that the people in his life who were supposed to protect him failed him.
Jason, why don't we do Qyburn?
Oh, Qyburn! Man, Qyburn, you were not a maester.
Not even a maester.
Not even a maester, as Grandmaster Pycelle loved to say. He was thrown out of the Citadel for doing perverted, strange experiments, the culmination of which would be what he did, what he accomplished really with the Mountain, which is a conquering of death. Obviously a smart guy, discovered by King Robb and Talisa at Harrenhal and freed. He then cleansed Jaime Lannister's wounds after he had his hand amputated, became the Master of Whispers for a time to Cersei Lannister. Again, brought the Mountain back to life, which is an accomplishment that no one should forget.
Kept those candied plums around?
Kept the candied plums around, ordered his children, lackeys, to kill Grandmaster Pycelle, and then also had a very strange attachment to the Hand of the White from the Dragon Pit, which he just really wanted to keep for reasons known only to himself. I will miss you, Qyburn. We will all miss you.
Special.
We should send out our boy Harry Strickland. I guess I'll take this one.
Yes.
Harry. Homeless Harry!
Oh.
6'8", coming out of Georgetown. You were a second-round pick, but you were a lottery pick in my heart. We really had high hopes. Thought you were the greatest sellsword in the world.
Oh, man.
You got smoked.
Got smoked.
That's it.
Went down in a hurry.
That's it. That's all I got for Harry. Let's do winners and losers.
Bad beat for Varys, not getting a eulogy because of homeless Harry.
All right, guys. This is time for our Fire and Ice Winner of the Week presented by Wendy's. You can get a free small Frosty when you order delivery of a Wendy's spicy chicken combo using the promo code HouseWendy's on DoorDash's delivery app. Jason, who won the week?
Drogon and dragons in general. Unleash them. Why haven't we been unleashing these dragons? Dany, you should have flamed the Red Keep when you had the chance. Drogon took that place apart like it was made of cotton candy. Just let them fly.
Yeah.
Drogon, proud of you, big boy. Incredible flames.
I'm going to go for my winner of the week being the Hound. He at least got it. I could call that a draw.
TKO.
In the Clegane Bowl.
Sure.
It was maybe like a 7-3 kind of Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Mal, I want to hear about your loser of the week.
All due respect to Drogon and his prowess on the battlefield, the loser is Dany. And that's really a shame. It's really a bummer. She said she didn't want to be the Queen of the Ashes, and we watched her become the Queen of the Ashes inside the episode. The showrunner said that they chose to portray the battle from the perspective of the people who were dying and never from Dany's perspective because...
I don't think we see Dany's face again after she makes
So
the
they said
decision.
that they wanted to subvert the norm of how we don't really think about the people who are dying and suffering. Okay, here's my counterpoint. We needed to see Dany's face.
Right, we needed
to
understand.
see what was happening in her mind as she was making this decision to burn millions of innocent people alive. 1 million people in King's Landing. How many did she kill?
Again, maybe she didn't hear the bells. Maybe she didn't hear him. There's a lot going on. She was really high up.
Aaron Rodgers was out there, and he can get any call heard, any audible in the line of scrimmage, anything in a huddle, runs the hurry up, and he was out there.
For all we know, Danny's like on the dragon, like Burn 7 was, and is like, did they do it?
I'm listening to Billie Eilish.
Did they?
That's what I like to listen to when I fly on a dragon.
Did they do the bells?
Did they do the bells?
Did they do them?
Tragic.
Okay, tragic. Let's get into Three-Eyed Raven. Let's talk about next week. It's the finale. It's the last episode of Game of Thrones
I'm not ready.
ever. Of course, after the finale of Game of Thrones, we will be here. Talk the Thrones will be here. It's going to be hashtag Talk the Thrones. We'll hold your hands through it. We're going to be holding each other's hands. But that's not it, guys, because after that, on Thursday, the Thursday following that, May 23rd at 12 p.m. Pacific,
Oh my God.
3 p.m. Eastern, we'll be right here on Twitter. Hashtag Talk the Thrones, trying to kind of come to grips with the end of the show. It's our finale show. It's our post-finale show.
Woo.
So we're going live on Sunday, obviously, and then we'll also go live the following Thursday. Let's get into our Three-Eyed Raven. We drop the glasses on the bird, and we say what we think is going to happen next week. It's the last episode of Game of Thrones. What do you guys see?
I mean, obviously, John is going to. I think Danny is kaput. As our friend Zane Lowe has been predicting
Chop, chop.
for weeks. Danny is for the chop. He's been saying.
For the-
and I
Getting
think
sacked
this
in
is
the morning,
and
yeah.
I think that this is the episode where Danny is finally for the chop. I'm not sure how it would happen, but John and Arya are not going to be like, cool, you killed 1 million people. They're going to be really upset about it.
We saw a bunch of snow in that episode in the coming attractions. Are we to take it that snow has come to King's Landing, or have they gone back north? Or
I think that's probably, I mean, who knows? My guess is going to be just dust from all the fire, the smoke, the carnage. You know,
That's
we
gross.
got finally
Yeah.
one of the vision shots that we had never seen, the solo
point.
shadow
Yeah.
of the dragon over the Red Keep. Well, I think we're going to get that other vision that we hadn't seen next week, which is the throne room in ruins. I still think that we're going to see the Iron Throne melted down, but maybe not in the way that any of us wanted.
Yeah.
Could that be another casualty of Dany's fire? I agree with Jason. I think that John is going to have to remove Dany from power in some way. What way that is, I
Which
think
would-
remains to be seen.
him, if he were to kill her,
Well,
thus bringing peace to the world, wouldn't that be kind of part of the Azor
I mean, but
Ahai
peace of the- I mean-
prophecy, though? Like, that's how he made his sword, by stabbing his...
There's a lot.
Nisa.
Yeah, there's just a lot of loose ends that would need to be closed, even if he kills her.
Right.
Because there's still the question of all these Unsullied and Dothraki who would be super pissed.
They still seem Team Dany.
Yeah, they're 100% Team Dany. The only
Yeah.
reason they are here is Daenerys Targaryen. They answer to no one else.
Right?
Counterpoint. Grey Worm a couple episodes ago was like, let's head to the beach.
Yeah, well, that was when-
And then this tonight he also snapped and massacred the innocents. So I think that, you know, I'm doubling down on something that I said last week, which is the thing that I was holding on to in that horrifying moment where Jon failed to pet Ghost farewell was the subtext of the exchange between Tormund and Jon about Jon really having the North in him. Is this farewell? You never know. I think that Jon will return to the North. He will abdicate his claim to the throne. He will head north, return to his roots, the only place that he's ever really felt like he belongs. And I can't stop thinking about Maester Aemon and everything that we've ever heard him say to Jon or Sam. Love is the death of duty. You know, think about what he said to
things
Jon.
we do for love.
The things we do for love. But think about what he said to Jon about a choice, the choice that he'd have to make. You must make that choice yourself and live with it for the rest of your days. This is going to be Jon's moment where he has to make that choice.
I want Bran. I just want something from Bran.
I think you might get Brandon on the throne, buddy.
I know, you might
I think
get
that's
it.
where this might be heading, because there aren't going to be a lot of people alive.
John's
or in
gonna,
positions
yeah,
of
John's gonna
power
be like,
after
I'm
this.
out.
Great council time.
Yeah, it's great. They're gonna
Break the wheel after Dany and Jon are both out of the picture.
Huh.
We're going to finally get a payoff on that conversation between Tyrion and Bran that we didn't see. And also, again, to last episode, think about that exchange between Tyrion and Bran you don't really want anymore. Well, what was the
Varys
other
said
thing we
that to
heard
him
about
today.
wanting?
Yeah.
You know, the best ruler is the one who doesn't want. I don't know how they bridge the gap between Bran saying, I'm not even a human being anymore,
know.
and let me help
And I don't
advise
want
you.
anything. Yeah, you're right.
Maybe it's Sansa, maybe it's some combination.
Incredible.
Or maybe it gets broken apart.
Incredible glow up
Hope so.
for the stoners out there should Bran Stark actually succeed and
That's right.
manage to sit.
All that time you spent making apple bongs and
My
watching
dude-
Blade Runner,
My dude is the king.
you can always sit on the Iron Throne. All right, so just to reiterate, next Sunday we will be here after the finale of Game of Thrones on Talk the Thrones, and on Thursday the 23rd we will be joining you with a post-series wrap-up show at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on Twitter. For Jason and for Mallory, I'm Chris. One more to go.